everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Mish's Market Minute. I am your host, Mish Schneider. And today, given the election, given the fact that we still don't know who the next president is going to be, but the fact that cannabis passed in 5 different states over the course of the last election, we thought we'd take a deep dive look into cannabis and some of the cannabis-related stocks. So our agenda is really to look at what trading opportunities might still be happening. What's been interesting about the whole cannabis space is it's been relatively volatile in the last couple of months after being extremely dormant for the last couple of years. Had a big flying move up a couple of years ago and then met with disappointment when the whole space realized that there was tremendous issues still in terms of the federal government and what was going to happen with banking, which right now, of course, is illegal, so federally illegal. However, with the new potential reign of, although Senate remains Republican, with the states legalizing, literally half the country now in the United States in favor of legalized pot, it's possible that that legislation might change as we get into the new regime in 2021. That's why I thought it was a good time now to look. So I want to focus first on MJ, the actual ETF, because I did some research on this today, and I was actually interested to find out that it's not just companies that trade or produce pot, but it's also tobacco or tobacco products, fertilizers, plant foods, pesticides, growing equipment for cannabis or tobacco. So that is also very interesting to me. We're going to take a look at some of those fertilizing stocks, some of the tobacco stocks, and also at pesticide stocks. And then in addition, the fund can hold pharmaceutical companies that produce, market, or distribute drug products that use cannabinoids. So we're going to take a look at that too. And also, we're going to take a look at some of the actual real pot stocks. Now, MJ as an ETF can only hold companies that are engaged in legal activities and possess all necessary permits, which I don't think means very much, except that it's sort of a disclaimer for the ETF itself. So MJ includes roughly 30 stocks in its basket that are all reconstituted and rebalanced quarterly. And of course, there are countries that the basket holds, and the top 3 countries are the United States. Well, as we just discussed, basically we have half the United States just about with legalization, whether it just be medicinally or recreationally. I know here where I live in New Mexico, we have medical pot legal, but not recreational pot legal, not yet. And it also holds Canada as the 2nd largest country. And of course, in Canada, it is now recreationally legal. And the UK, which again, like New Mexico, has medicinal legal marijuana, but not recreational legal marijuana. And I also want to take a look at the top 10 holdings, which is Canopy Growth, Pharmacuticals, Cronos Group, Tilray, Aphria, OrganiGram, Arena Pharma, Hexo, Aurora Cannabis, and actually one OTC or over-the-counter stock, Japan Tobacco. And then in addition to that, and I've actually added to this list since I made this a whole list here, I've added 3 more, but I also want to look at Grow Generation, Harvest Health and Recreation, which is also a Canadian over-the-counter stock, Jushi Holdings, which is also an over-the-counter, NEPT, Neptune Wellness, Cresco Labs, another over-the-counter, and Altria Group, which is a tobacco company, MO. I'm going to add to that, which you don't have listed here, New Age Beverage, because that's a cannabinoid, which has actually been of some interest, Scott's Miracle-Gro, and Mosaic, which reported recently and did not do well in earnings. So we'll take a look at how that's doing now. So let's get going. Okay, so let's start by looking at the MJ stock itself. And today, which is Thursday, November 5th, it had made a nice big move out of a lot of consolidation and basing that's been going on. So it had cleared the 50-day moving average earlier in the week, and then came up with a gap open on this particular day, which again is Thursday, and now is running into some resistance up here at the 200-day moving average. But this we can say is a nice size breakout, and if we just go back and look here at some levels, we can see that now this whole 1195 to 12 area should hold to some kind of support. So when you're listening to this on Friday, if it actually has held that 1195.12 level, then you could feel confident that it's holding up. And if you want to, you can wait for it to clear the 200-day moving average, which is the green line at 1268, or you can get in, which we did, with a smaller position ahead of that, and then add if that indeed winds up clearing. Now, if we look at the performance down here, which is interesting, now it is starting to actually a little bit outperform against the benchmark of the SPY. And if you take a look at the real motion momentum here, it's starting to really kick into gear. Where does that start to get a little bit oversold? That we're not really worried about at this point, but we'll definitely see that we can have more momentum. And of course, as we know with all instruments, oversold or overbought can get, did I say oversold before? I meant to say overbought. Overbought can get more overbought, just like oversold can get more oversold. So keep this in mind, because what this does as an ETF is it gives you exposure to that whole basket I just mentioned. So you're not just going to be involved with pot, but you're going to be involved with some of the industries that are involved along with marijuana growing. So if anything happens legislatively, particularly as we get into 2021, this could really have an explosive year. And if we just take a look at this from a longer period of time here, let's just take a look at this over the course of the last 3 years. You can see that right now we have this really nice base forming, and this is what I just showed you here at the 200. But look where it was back in 2018. This traded all the way up to around 45. I mean, literally, it's 1/4 the price right now. This is exactly what happened during the whole notion of the Trump years, which essentially was saying that there was no way that they were even going to consider any type of legislation to help the cannabis industry alone. But policy can only go so far. Eventually, popular vote and popular social trends take over, as we've seen in the last year in the alternative energy space. Not something that was popular with the current administration, but very popular among investors. So always keep that in mind. Okay, so from there, we're going to go through the actual basket itself to see what's in here and what possibly could be setting up or has already set up. So this is CGC. This is Canopy Growth. And again, I'm going to keep the 3-year chart here just so that you can see where this was all the way up here at 60. It's now 1/3 of that price, trading here at 21. And this, of course, is the pandemic swoon that happened. We caught this move up and basically stayed flat. But now that the election is over, we're more interested not just in MJ, but in some of the particular pot stocks. So let's go now to a 1 year on this to take a closer look at what we're seeing here. Now, one of the things that I have talked about on the media lately, and when I say the media, I was on TD Ameritrade, Fox, NASDAQ Talks, a couple of other places, Cheddar, and in all these places I've been basically talking about the same thing, and that is what we at Market Gauge call the election reset or the election opening range. Now, I have done a video for you all on the opening range for more of a short-term basis. This is for a long-term basis, which basically says that whatever the low is from the week of November 2nd to whatever the high is to the end of the week, November 6th, that becomes a new range, so that if something breaks out of that range next week on Monday, let's say, or any day after, but you want to watch that range. If it breaks out over the high, your bias can become bullish. And I think this one isn't particularly interesting to me to watch that, just because even though on Thursday we had this nice move up, we haven't gotten past the high of 2167 yet, which was the high that was made a few days ago. And so if it clears the high from this week, which so far, see, this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so is that 2167, you may have not only a good opportunity to still get into this, because as you can see, it was way higher, it was 3 times as high, but you now have a new sort of opening range to take a look at. So now if we move on to GWPH, this is more in the pharmaceutical area. And this now, looking at a year chart, look at the momentum here. It's cleared the black line, so the momentum is great. It's just recently started outperforming. It reported earnings, which is why you're seeing this big move here. And now we're getting some level of decent consolidation over the 200-day moving average. So that's pretty good. And again, if we go back and look at this at a 3-year period, just for fun, this was also trading all the way up close to 200. So this is doing better than the other ones I showed you. This is only 50% cheaper than what it was 3 years ago. So now going back to the year, let's see what happens. Now in this case, I wouldn't use that same range I just talked about with CGC because this week's range has just been explosive from the low to the high. So instead, what I would do is, now that we're getting a confirmation here, it looks like over that 200-day moving average or over 109.53, you basically have the low of the day it cleared. In this case, it would be 107.59 to kind of use as a risk. And you can take a look at this and say, okay, I'm going to be a buyer here anywhere over 109.53, risk a couple of dollars on this to see if I can go from where it's currently trading up to possibly, at first, I would say realistically, take out this high, which is 121.15, and maybe even try to fill the gap that we have here to 131.76. That would be an incredible risk reward. Now, if we move on, and hopefully I'll get to all of these, but if I don't, you can always ask me. Cronos is another one. Now, again, if we look at where this was 3 years ago, and I think this is kind of a fun thing to look at, this was all the way up at 25. And now again, this is literally a quarter of the price that it was 3 years ago. So now if we go back to the 1-year price, it's just for perspective. So because, you know, when you're charting and you're looking to trade off of a technical pattern based on fundamental information, you always want to look left to look right. And now we can see what's happening here on Thursday is this is clearing that 200-day moving average. So in this case, on Friday, November 6th, you want to see this actually confirm with a close over 605. And then you can risk to under the low. I always like to take the low of the day that it cleared a major moving average, and with a little bit of fudge, make that my risk, but the low is 568. So essentially, what it does tomorrow, you can use that as a risk. It's outperforming the SPY. It's showing a good increase in momentum. And the last time the big momentum peaked, by the way, the price was all the way up here, over 8. So again, if you're not risking that much, if you're risking $1, $2 on something like this, and in this case, really just about $1, and you're trying to make $2, that's perfectly okay. When I say okay as a target, it means not that you exit the full position, but that you at least take some profit target there, go to a no loss stop and see where it goes from there. And now let's move on to the next one, which is Tilray. Now that's also making an explosive move. And in the case of Tilray, look at that momentum here and look at how it's just now starting to get to that zero line here, outperformance on the SPY. And again, we've cleared the 50-day moving average, we've cleared the 10-day moving average, and now we're busting out of this whole range that we've been trading now since really essentially July, August. And so that means that this is a good area for you to be looking at. It needs to hold about 7, let's say. But you are going to run into some problems here maybe at the 200-day moving average. So at this point, I would almost say that I would wait now, because if this is starting to get a little overbought as we get closer to resistance, it might be better to wait now for this to actually totally clear the 200 and maybe even this peak high right here, which was at 876 that we had back in August. Over 876, you kind of clear everything. You have this big base. And again, just so you can see perspective, 3 years ago, this traded up to a high. No, is that possible, really? Did this trade up to a high of 283? I didn't even know that myself. Unless that's a mistake, that's extraordinary. It doesn't look like it was a mistake. So there you go. Again, this was obviously a very high-flying stock with a lot of promise. So paying up over 870, as I just mentioned, 875, really actually seems kind of cheap and a good confirmation, considering the history of this particular stock. Now, another one is APHA, and I'm just going to give you a whole bunch. You can decide which ones you like. But in APHA, by the way, again, we're going back 3 years here. Let's go to 1 year. And if we look at this over a 1-year chart, this also has some good resistance up here at 642. So again, right now we're at about $1 cheaper. We've cleared the 50-day moving average. The 200 is still below it, puts this in an accumulation phase right now. So I don't know if this is necessarily my favorite, but one of the things I'd like to do is I like to see when it fills a gap. So that gap here is 580. And today's high, or Thursday's high, I should say, is 565. So perhaps if it clears that gap to 580, on the next dip, anywhere close to around 540 to 550, then you could take a shot and risk to underneath that 50-day moving average. Next one that we have here is OGI. This is a company I never heard of until I was actually doing research for you all today. This is OrganiGram Holdings. And with OrganiGram Holdings, this is a $1.38 stock. So I generally try to shy away from the stocks that trade at such low prices. But again, just for fun, let's see where it was 3 years ago. This was an $8 stock. So this has never been a big stock. But those of you who may feel more comfortable in cheaper stocks, and everybody's got their thing that they like to do, this has cleared now the 50 and the 10. I would probably say at this point, I'd wanted to get past the 200-day moving average and also maybe 180. Even waiting till 2 makes me feel like at least the price, which was down at around $1, has doubled, and there's some actual other interest in this other than what I'm showing you today. ARNA was the next one. And with ARNA, completely different situation. It's an $87 stock. This is another pharmaceutical. It already had its breakout. This actually, outperformance of the SPY is coming down, as so is the momentum. So what does it tell me about this? This is getting an inside day. Maybe over 90, you get another leg up. That's certainly possible. But at this point, with the momentum coming down a little and the outperformance of the SPY coming down a little, I'd probably want to see maybe a little bit more of a correction on this before I got involved. Through 90, I'd be very nimble if it either goes right away or it doesn't. Next one is Hexo. And with Hexo, this is also a small stock, really small stock, 72 cents. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's just showing you really basically that even these small stocks are starting to get some interest. I'd rather talk to you about some of the more interesting stocks like the next one, which is Aurora Cannabis. And again, this was a stock that was trading much higher, had this huge gap here not too long ago. This was probably an earnings gap or maybe some news, I don't know, but it's come all the way down. Now it's trying to penetrate the 50. With this stock, I think you have to wait for this to clear the 200 and maybe 7 around this level here, 7, even 751. And then this too could look interesting. But unlike everything else I just showed you, the ones that I like, look at the momentum here. It's come off the lows in the Bollinger Band, but I'd want to see a little bit more momentum in this. So there's no divergence here at all because it's under the moving averages and under the moving averages on the momentum. But it is actually gaining a little bit on the SPY, which makes sense considering how hot the space is right here. Grow generation is probably one of the most exciting ones of late. And this thing here has just basically tested the 50. So had I talked to you like a week ago, I would have been telling you to buy this against the 50-day moving average. But now, with it coming so close to recent resistance, what we have to do is we have to go back and look at this from 3 years ago just to gain perspective. And guess what? We are actually almost at new highs here on the entire stock. So if we go back to 1 year, and we say that it has to clear the high of this day, which is 2288. The question is going to be, if you're a momentum trader, you won't care. You give a wide stop and you let it go. If you're more of a trader that likes to be near moving averages for safety like me, maybe you would be more of an active trade to see. But if you wanted to get some kind of idea of a target on that, if you just take this whole sideways Bayesian action, which really comes from 13 to really, I'm going to say about $27. If it breaks out from 20, I would say 27 to 30 would probably be a reasonable target just based on some chart measurement. And that, of course, is if it takes out this high here of 22.88. Okay, next one is these are smaller stocks, so I'm not even going to bother to show because I rather take the time to show you some of the bigger stocks to trade and some of the ones that I would be more interested in. But NEPT is on the list, JUSHF is on the list, HRF. SF is on the list. That were all mentioned in the PowerPoint. You can look at them. They all are on StockCharts platform. Only one that's not on the StockChart platform that I showed you before is the Jushi one, JAPAF. That is actually not on StockCharts. So you can look at that on other platforms. But these little smaller ones, I think we can spend our time better looking at some of the other ones I showed you I wanted to mention. And one of them is MO, which is the Altria company. This is, now, what I happen to know from a friend of mine who works for the tobacco companies is that they have already made some investments, money aside to buy warehouses and things like that when the eventuality, because everybody feels that it is eventuality, cannabis becomes federally legal. So that's why I like to look at this, because right now this is going to be more federally sensitive than obviously the fact that Montana, New Jersey, Arizona, a couple of other states just passed legalization. But what is interesting to me about this is, what do you see down here? Here is your real motion, and it's already over the 200, not quite over the 50, but we're well under both the moving averages right here. That makes it simple, because what this means is the momentum is increasing, even though it's still well underperforming the SPY right here. All you simply have to do is keep your eye on this, set an alert for the part when it finally clears both of these moving averages. And then I think you might start to see at least these tobacco companies getting wind of the fact that they could be getting more involved legally with the marijuana space. Okay, the last three I want to show you here is New Age Beverage. This is one that was incredible a while ago, then got really, really tanked. It actually reports earnings, so I would keep an eye on this. What you can't see is on the weekly chart, and let me just show you, by the way, a longer range chart on this just for fun. This was trading up here at 10. We actually caught this move. I went on Real Vision and mentioned to buy it down here at like 4 at the time, and it went from 4 literally up to 10 in just a matter of days. And we really, except for getting chopped up a couple of times in between, haven't touched this stock since. But now it's coming out and back into its own a little bit. Through 333 is where the 200-week moving average is. That might be worth taking a look at if you want to take a look at something like this. This is an exciting company. What makes this company stand out, and the reason why I had talked about it back in 2018, was because Bob Marley's family licensed his image for their cans of CBD tea. And Bob Marley is, you know, probably like Elvis Presley, one of the most recognizable people on the planet. Next, we're going to look at is SMG. This is Scott's Miracle-Gro. This was another one that gave us a great trade. Reported earnings and now is doing really well. You're not that far. I mean, it's kind of far, but not too far from the 50-day moving average, but you're also really close to the most recent resistance. If we go back 3 years on this one, we're actually at sort of the new highs right here. So this is specialty chemicals, and some of it is actually used for cannabis, not all of it. But nonetheless, if we go back to the 1-year chart here, my recommendation on this one at this point would be really to be waiting for 175 to be taken out. And then probably what I would do at that point was that I would have some kind of stop, maybe like right under 165 or something. Give it about a $10 window to see if you can get from 175 up to 200, because this is a company that's continuing to grow. And the last one, which is fertilizers, is Mosaic. Hold on, let me put an underscore here. Now, Mosaic reported earnings and tanked a little bit, but let's take a look. Is there any kind of divergence? Well, not really. It's above the 200, under the 50 here on Real Motion. It's underperforming the SPY, but sitting right here on Bollinger Band support. And it spiked down as of Wednesday, and on Thursday is making an inside day. So with this one, I'd keep an eye on it, particularly if it can get back over, let's say, well, the 50-day moving average for sure, because that would put it back into a bullish phase. But even if you want to look at it before then, watch the momentum indicators here to possibly clear the 50. Those plugins are going to be available real soon. And if you really just wanted to say, you know, I'm going to take a shot on this because of the whole idea of what's happening now in this cannabis space, I'd maybe look it to be a buyer. Let me stretch this out a little bit here. Right above, let's say, this outside day high right here, which is 1737, give it a little room, maybe 1774, between 1737, 1774. I'd have my stop under this low right here, under 16. That's a reasonable risk reward to see if it's got anything to the upside going forward. And that's really it. So remember the cannabis space when you're thinking about investment decisions as we're getting past the election period here and into 2021 in particular. In this case, I would think of this more a little bit longer term, but of course, any term trader can benefit from trading these indices, this ETF and some of the pot stocks, like for example, Tilray, which on Thursday is up over 30%. That's a nice active trade right there. Okay, I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks so much for listening, and bye for now.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're going to bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.